ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaskar my dear friends, this is video number 10 of Katha Upanishad. This video starts with verse number 14 of chapter 1 of part 2 of Katha Upanishad. The perception of multiplicity in the non-dual Brahma is again condemned. Verse 14. As rainwater falling on a mountain peak runs down the rocks in all directions, even so he who sees the attributes as different from Brahma verily runs after them in all directions, runs down in is dispersed and ultimately lost. Attributes. The word dharma in the text means literally attribute, which according to Advaita Vedanta is non-different from substance. The attributes which distinguish phenomenal objects from Brahma are the result of Maya and are therefore illusory. They are really one with Brahma, which on account of Maya appears as the universe and created beings. Gaudapada, the great Advaita philosopher, uses the word dharma to denote the jiva or embodied beings, which is in a sense identical with Brahma, runs after, etc. That is to say, pursues separate material entities in the relative world. He becomes a victim of ever recurring death and does not attain liberation. The perception of multiplicity resulting from ignorance is the cause of all suffering. As rainwater running down the sides of a steep hill divides itself into innumerable channels and ultimately becomes lost without serving any fruitful purpose, so also he who sees the multiplicity of embodied beings created by the upadhis and pursues them as if they were real becomes lost in the relative world and does not attain liberation, which is the ultimate goal of evolution. The illumined person is free from the illusion of multiplicity created by the upadhis. He sees the non-dual Atma, which is pure consciousness. Thus his soul becomes absorbed in that non-dual Atma. Verse 15. As pure water poured into pure water becomes one with it, so also, O Gautama, does the self of the sage who knows. Says the word Muni in the text means a contemplative person knows the unity of Atma and Brahma. The soul is by nature pure, free, illumined, and immortal. These characteristics remain the same even when, through ignorance, it identifies itself with a material body. Through knowledge, the embodied soul rediscovers its immortal nature. Nothing new is added to the soul, nor is anything taken away from it. A woman, through ignorance, sometimes thinks that she has lost her necklace through the ornament, though the ornament hangs from her neck all the while. When she discovers it, she does not obtain a new necklace. In spite of the apparent multiplicity, the soul is one and non-dual, and as such free from fear. Therefore, one should give up false pride and haughtiness, discard the fallacious advice of the misguided logicians who proclaim the multiplicity of Atma, and the erroneous counsel of the heretics who teach its non-existence, and should realize Atma's non-duality as taught by the Vedas, which are more solicitous of our welfare than 1,000 fathers and mothers. Here ends chapter 1 of part 2 of Katha Upanishad. Now chapter 2 of part 2 of Katha Upanishad starts. There is a city with 11 gates belonging to the unborn Atma of undistorted consciousness. He who meditates on him grieves no more, liberated from the bonds of ignorance. He becomes free. This verily is that city, etc. That is to say, the body. The 11 gates are the 11 apertures, the two eyes, the two ears, the two nostrils, the mouth, the navel, the two lower organs, and the aperture at the top of the head, through which the life breath of a yogi goes out at the time of death, belonging to under the lordship of unborn, free from such characteristics of matter as birth, growth, decay, and death. Undistorted consciousness, as from the position of the sun there is no change in its light, so also from the position of Atma there is no change in its consciousness. Such modifications as growth and decay cannot be associated with consciousness. Were this not so, one would have to think of another unchanging consciousness to be the witness of all the changes. Atma, being the ultimate witness of all external and internal changes, is the Lord of the body. Meditates. This meditation is accompanied by true knowledge. Grieves no more, because the meditator is free from all desires and sees Atma in all beings. The knowledge of Brahma makes him fearless and consequently free from grief. Liberated, the knower of Atma, even while living in the body, is free from the bondage of desire and action created by ignorance. Becomes free. After death, he attains final liberation and is not under any compulsion to assume a body in the relative world. A city and its master are quite different from each other. A change in the former does not affect the latter. Likewise, Atma is entirely different from the body. The growth or decay of the body does not in any way affect Atma. Immutable and changeless as it is independent of the body, self-knowledge is very subtle and profound. The present chapter explains it from another approach. There are not different Atmas in different bodies. The same Atma dwells in all bodies. He is omnipresent. Verse number 2. He is the sun dwelling in the bright heavens. He is the air dwelling in the interspace. He is the fire dwelling on earth. He is the guest dwelling in the house. He dwells in man, in the gods, in truth, in the sky. He is born in the water, on earth, in the sacrifice, on the mountains. He is the true and the great. Guest, etc. Or the sentence may be translated: He is the Soma juice dwelling in the sacrificial jar. Truth, or the word Rita may mean sacrifice. Water. He is born in the water as conch, pearl, oysters, fish, and other sea creatures. Earth, that is to say, as barley, corn, and other cereals. Sacrifice, as its various auxiliaries. Mountains, as streams and rivers. True, of unchanging nature. Great, because he is the cause of all. There is only one Atma without a second, which is the all-pervasive self of the universe. Atma, being non-different from Brahma, completely excludes multiplicity and difference. Here is evidence pointing to the existence of Atma independent of the body. Verse 3 of chapter 2 of part 2 of Katha Upanishad. He is who sends prana upward and who leads apana downward. All the devas worship that adorable one seated in the middle. He, the self, whom Nachiketa wanted to know by his third boon. Prana, one phase of the vital energy known as the breath, whose presence is felt in the nostrils. The four other phases are called apana, vyana, udana, and samana. Apana helps in the ejection of unassimilated food and drink. Vyana moves in all directions and pervades the entire body as the narocurrents. The chief function of Udana, which operates in the throat, is to help the soul and the subtle body pass out at the time of death. Samana helps in digestion. It also carries nutrition through the body. These five are not so many different forces but various aspects of one and the same vital energy known as the Mukhya Prana or Chief Prana, which also sometimes is called simply the prana. According to Vedantic seers, this prana is a manifestation in the individual body of the dynamic cosmic energy which manifests itself through all animate and inanimate objects and sustains them. Devas here the word means the sense organs. Adorable. Vamana, the word in the text also means dwarf. The self is often described as being of the size of a thumb in the middle, that is to say, in the heart. The sense organs bring the impressions of the outside world to the Atma, like subjects bringing offering to a king. That is to say, all their activities are for the Atman's enjoyment. The Atma uses the sense organs and the prana to serve its purpose. As a king uses his officers, it is totally different from them. The individual soul uses the body as its instrument to gain experiences which ultimately lead to its emancipation. When it abandons the body, the latter disintegrates like a city after the king has abandoned it. Verse 4. When the soul identified with the body and dwelling in it is torn away from the body is freed from it, what then remains? This verily is that. What, etc. At the time of death, the subtle body, consisting of the five pranas, the five organs of perception, the five organs of action, the mind, and the intellect, leaves the gross body along with the soul. The gross body deteriorates and falls into ruin. This verily, etc. The Atma whom Nachiketa wanted to know is that spiritual entity in man in whose absence the body cannot live even for an instant. It is quite different from the body. It may be objected that the body is sustained not by Atma but by the prana or vital force, in the absence of which it perishes. This objection is answered. Verse number 5. No mortal ever lives by prana which goes up, nor by apana which goes down. Man lives by something different on which these two depend. No mortal. According to the Vedanta philosophy, any combination of insentient parts must be for the sake of a sentient being. Combination implies purpose, which points to sentiency. For instance, an object like a house, a vehicle, or a piece of furniture, which consists of parts, does not serve any purpose of its own but that of someone else. The prana and the sense organs consist of inert parts. They are produced by a combination of the subtle elements in varying proportion. Therefore, they are directed in their activities by someone else whose interest they serve. This is Atma or the Self, the simple, non-dual, homogeneous spirit. Prana and Apana in the text also include the sense organs. The sense organs, the prana, the mind, the intellect, and the rest perform their respective functions to serve the need of Atma. The question asked by Nachiketa was now directly answered by the king of death. Well then, Gautama, I shall tell you about this profound and eternal Brahma and also about what happens to the Atma after meeting death and also etc. If the Atma leaves the body after the attainment of knowledge, it obtains liberation and is not born again in the relative world. The question as to what happens after death does not apply to the liberated soul. The doctrine of karma and rebirth is laid down for those who die without the knowledge of Brahma. Verse number 7. Some jivas enter the womb to be embodied as organic beings, and some go into non organic matter according to their work and according to their knowledge. Organic being, living creatures endowed with physical organs, non organic matter such as trees, plants, and so on. According to the doctrine of karma, and rebirth, the future of the embodied soul is determined by its present action and knowledge. By good action it becomes good, and by evil actions it becomes evil. One can assume any body in the relative universe from that of a god to that of a plant. If sattva preponderates at the time of death, one obtains a god's body, if rajas a human body, and if tamas a subhuman body. But it must be remembered that the nature of Atma is not altered by the fact of it's assuming a body. Atma uses the body to serve its purpose. All will ultimately attain liberation. Now is described Atma, whose nature is incomprehensible to the ordinary understanding. It is the unchanging consciousness present in man and the witness of his waking dream and dreamless states. Verse number 8. He, the Purusha, who remains awake while the sense organs are asleep, shaping one lovely form after another, that indeed is the pure, that is Brahma, and that alone is called the immortal. All worlds are contained in him, and none can pass beyond. This verily is that shaping, etc. refers to the dream state when the sense organs remain inactive. When a man is asleep, Atma, under the spell of ignorance, creates the dream objects, or it may be explained in this way. By the very presence of Atma, the mind or inner organ creates various forms out of its accumulated past impressions. In dreamless sleep also, Atma or pure consciousness exists as the witness of the passive state of mind when nothing is comprehended. Therefore, a man waking from dreamless sleep remarks that he knew nothing at that time. Atma is the imperishable and unchanging witness of the three states of consciousness. That is Brahma. Brahma or ultimate reality is the pure consciousness in man which is identical with the pure consciousness in the universe. Are contained. Pure consciousness is the ultimate cause and ground of the universe. In spite of the multiplicity of bodies, Atma is one and non-dual. Stanza number 9. As the same non-dual fire, after it has entered the world, becomes different according to whatever it burns, so also the same non-dual Atma dwelling in all beings becomes different according to whatever it enters, and it exists also without. In spite of the repeated assertions of the Vedantists regarding the non-duality of Atma, many misguided logicians, particularly among the dualists, insist that there must be many Atmans. They contend that the death of one person does not imply the death of another. The fruit of action performed by one is not reaped by another, and the activity of one does not make another active. For these and similar reasons, the dualists contend that there must be many Atmas, mutually independent, each existing as a separate entity. It is because there are many Atma, they say, that one does not see any confusion in such phenomena as birth and death. The Advaitists reply that the non-dual Atma, because of its association with different upadhis or limiting adjuncts, appears to assume different names and forms. These upadhis are illusory and not real. The apparent Atma may be many, but the real Atma is one. Atma pervades all the different objects in the phenomenal world and yet exists in its intrinsic purity. Vedanta is not pantheism. So I conclude this video here. Next video will start with the verse number 10 of chapter 2 of part 2 of Katha Upanishad. So it will start another illustration, verse number 10. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar, my dear friends.